Hello, everyone. It's such a big week. I'm editing a lot of video this week especially because I got the opportunity to talk with the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. It's Administrator Regan, and he's here with me now. How are you?
I'm doing good, Hank. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I don't know if I'm getting older or if EPA administrators are getting younger, but I'm starting to feel like maybe my age range is starting to be represented quite a lot in government. It's great to see you, and I am so interested in how you are feeling this week. How are you feeling this week? It's probably a pretty busy week.
It's a busy week, but hey, this is one of the best weeks ever, Hank. I mean, as an EPA administrator, we never really get big gifts as regulators. And this Inflation Reduction Act, oh my goodness, it's a huge, huge gift, not only for the planet, I don't want to be selfish, but it's also a big, big gift for EPA.
This is a big bill. It's got a lot in it. I spent the last week trying to figure out what's in there and sort of trying to categorize it into pieces, what are these different pieces trying to do, and a lot of the individual pieces try to do multiple things. Can you kind of give me an idea of what the bill is trying to do?
Absolutely. Number one, it's a huge bill. It's a big deal. Under President Biden's leadership, working with the House and the Senate, we're finally getting this thing across the finish line. So let me be clear, it's the largest investment in mitigating the climate crisis in US history. It's a really big deal. And there are lots of things in there that, begin to save the planet, but also protect people. There are resources in there, quite frankly, that will begin to help those who have been disproportionately impacted or suffered the worst under traditional pollution and climate pollution.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if you don't like dirty garbage trucks going through your neighborhood, and you're thinking about that FedEx truck that's idling out in front of your doorstep, this bill is going to push resources in so we can electrify those vehicles. That reduces, the asthma cases, that, allows for kids to be healthier. Really excited about that. There's money in there to reduce methane. Methane emissions from the oil and gas sector, 80 times more potent than CO2.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing about it is, we got satellites, we got all sorts of technology now that can identify these methane leaks. I was at a conference in Austin, Texas, and they had these robotic dogs that they can send around and really sniff out methane emissions. Cool technology like that we'll begin to use in our rulemaking to reduce methane and help reduce that climate pollution. And then the last thing I'll say is tax incentives, financial instruments that will help usher in electric vehicles, new technologies, push the power sector to continue to invest in clean energy technology. So I am really excited for the planet. I'm excited for average people. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the average family will save $500 a year on their energy bill because of the Inflation Reduction Act. So you can tell I'm pretty excited about it. I hope everyone's excited about it.
There's so much to look at. And so I just sort of assumed that everything was going to be focused on just getting greenhouse emissions down. And that is obviously a big part of it. But there's these big pieces that are about the impact that change has on actual individual people, whether that's lowering electricity bills or trying to have the economic development from this stuff occur in the same places that are going to be losing economic development because of the transition away from fossil fuels. And there's a lot in there that is industrial policy, basically, like trying to get the US on the side of making the stuff that's going to be really important to the whole world as we make this gigantic energy transition. But you talked a little bit about environmental justice. Basically, like environmental damage, climate change, these things affect everyone. There's no one who isn't affected by it, but there are people who are affected more. The impacts do not fall equally on all people. Do you feel like we are, as a country, getting better at recognizing that reality and responding to it?
I do. I'm very optimistic about that, Hank. I have to say that one of the exciting things about working for Joe Biden is he has made environmental justice, racial equity, and equity, period, a central part of this administration. He's the first sitting president to talk about environmental justice during a State of a Union address. So he is really laser focused on this. I'll jump back to the Inflation Reduction Act because there's over $60 billion, 60 billion, billion with a B, that is focused on environmental justice. We know that because of racist policies in this country across multiple disciplines, the environment is no different. And there are people who have been disproportionately impacted for generations from traditional pollution. If you add climate pollution on top of that, it's just compounding and compounding and compounding. So what we want to do is we want to solve all of these problems for everyone at the same time so we can create a rising tide. Because after all, that's what will make this country as great as it should be. If the least amongst us have equal protection under the law and have the opportunity to live and thrive, then we all benefit from a humanitarian standpoint, but also from a global competitive standpoint. Like, we want this country to be as competitive as possible. And that's what I like about what you said earlier, Hank. This is about protecting the planet, and it is about protecting people. But at the end of the day, it also impacts our national security. Climate change is a threat to our national security with other nations, and we have to win this foot race on the clean energy revolution. So if we're going to win, if we're going to be globally competitive, we have to follow the president's lead. We have to embrace the Inflation Reduction Act, and we have to be laser focused on saving this planet and mitigating climate change impacts.
So I hear a lot of frustration, there's a lot of cynicism among young people. I think that this is, it seems increasingly common. Though I remember when I was, in my early days in the environmental movement, it was a lot of bad news and it was a lot of not good feelings. But I know that you've also been working on these things for a long time, a lot deeper, a lot longer than me. I'm wondering how you feel about the progress that we have made so far. You don't seem like a pessimistic guy, just from knowing you for 10 minutes. But I am curious how you put that into context and how you take sort of the gravity of the problem we're trying to solve, the gravity of the inertia that's keeping us from solving it, and mixing those two things together into what seems to be optimism.
I am optimistic. I'm optimistic a great deal because we have a president that gets it. And this is something that Secretary Buttigieg and I talk about all the time. We're some of the youngest members of the cabinet. Mm-hmm. We believe that we can make that generational connection to even younger people so that they can see themselves in the vision that we're crafting. As I travel the country, and quite frankly, as I travel internationally, it's that energy and that accountability from young people that really keeps me going. Which is why I'm going to establish a youth council so that I can have, guidance from our young people as we build out our policies and regulations. I've got an 8-year-old son, Hank, and he is the recycling expert in the family. He's the one that reminds my wife not to let the water run while she's brushing her teeth. It's that energy and that enthusiasm and that second nature sustainable aspect that young people bring to the table. And I personally think we have to harness that in every single thing we're doing.
Is there a way to respond to that cynicism though? Like, how do we, because I don't think that anything gets done if you don't think anything can get done. And so I think there's the need to fight back against that. And I think that the biggest thing you can do to establish trust is get stuff done. And I feel like stuff's getting done right now in a way that, it wasn't long ago that it didn't really feel like maybe it would. And so there is that, but it seems awfully difficult to sort of overcome the just a general perspective that maybe we have gone too far, or that we cannot move fast enough to solve these problems.
Listen, I'll say we have to do a better job of engaging young people directly. And we have to take this message, this conversation you and I are having, we have to take it directly to young people. And we have to be able to have a conversation where we're talking about deliverables. The Inflation Reduction Act is a deliverable. So when we talk about these billions of dollars, these investments, technology in the future, when we're talking to young people, we also have to say, now, this is the progress we're making, but let me remind you of history. Every single social revolution in this country, from civil rights to women's rights, were led by young people. So there's a role that young people have to play in what we're doing, and we have to establish that partnership. And we have to be honest about that, and we have to listen to young people. So I'm very optimistic, and I think, hey, I like to hit the road. I like to travel internationally. I like to host events where young people congregate. I like the tough questions. I like the accountability. And I think they should know that and see themselves in everything we're doing at EPA.
That's fantastic. Are there some solutions to climate problems that are most exciting to you?
You know, you and I are slightly younger than most people who are leading government agencies. And I can tell you that even when I talk to past EPA administrators, the role technology plays in the solutions that we're seeking, the quickness of innovation and the evolution of business models, matching with technology and science and data, we can move much faster than we've ever moved before.
Yeah, it's wild. So
that sort of geeky tech nerd side is actually paying off right now as EPA administrator. And I'm excited about that. You know, when I think about the creation of the iPhone, no one knew how big and diverse the world of apps would be.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if we create these platforms, we can bring all of these ideas and technology to the table. And there are solutions to these problems that won't be developed until next month or 3 months from now. And it's exciting to keep discovering those solutions as we go along this journey.
It's reflective of how investment always works. Like the biggest hunk of the money in the Inflation Reduction Act is going towards proven technologies that have gotten cheaper over the years to the point where they are, you know, while they are producing electricity, which isn't all the time, they are basically, you know, more than competitive with traditional fossil fuels. And then there's a lot of smaller investments in things that might be, that are, you know, big, interesting, who knows, advanced biofuels or advanced nuclear or, you know, power storage systems. And you know, you don't know which of those things are going to pay off. And some of them probably aren't, but like they aren't nearly the size of the investments we're doing in stuff we know is going to work. But those little things are really exciting because you know, it's 10 years that this act covers. And in those 10 years, things are going to change a lot. And we don't know how though.
That's absolutely right. And I'm excited because a lot of these grant dollars that are in the act, we're able to give those to community groups who are partnering with universities and incubation centers. And so the matching dollars and the low interest loans are available to people who have never been at the table. If we get these universities and these young adults, these incubation centers, really tackling these issues with community groups on the ground, these solutions can look 1,001 different ways. And we have to feed all of these solutions to see which ones work for each individual community. That's the exciting part. We don't have to accept the notion that there's a one size fit all. There are lots of opportunities to protect people from pollution, you know, use technology and combat this climate crisis. And it could look 1,001 different ways.
That's right. It's a big country with a lot of different ways of living inside of it, a lot of different kinds of cities, a lot of different kinds of people, allowing for these big pools of money that communities can figure out what to do with it themselves rather than the bill being prescriptive on every single thing is really interesting, which isn't something I'd written into the script before I had this conversation. And that's probably going in now.
Well, you know, what I'd like to say too is the president's cabinet is diverse in terms of race and gender, sexual orientation, but it's also diverse in age. And I think when you look at this whole of government approach to some of these problems, that's an example of recognizing that there is a diverse suite of ways to solve American problems. And so we have to really embrace that. And I think that is so true on the ground. The solutions for Alabama and North Carolina are different than New York, California, and Arizona. And as I travel the country and as I talk to these communities, what I'm bringing back to Washington, D.C. is that breadth of diversity for how to solve these problems. And if we can take these federal dollars and put it in the hands of those communities, we will have solutions on the ground that have been there for decades, but have never had the resources to match those ideas. That's the way we're going to solve these problems in a very rapid way.
And I'm right that a lot of those dollars are specifically earmarked for disadvantaged communities. Yeah.
You know, a significant portion, are at least 40% in the bipartisan infrastructure law, is, you know, directed to disadvantaged communities. But as we look across the spectrum, we may see 50 to 60% for disadvantaged communities, but there are enough resources for all communities.
Yeah.
You know, when I think about the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act for EPA, that's about $100 billion for just EPA. That's not including the other agencies. So that's historic.
Yep.
That's historic. If you get 40% of this level of funding going to disadvantaged communities, no matter your race or how much money you have in your pockets, this is amazing. It's transformative for our society, and I am glad to be a part of it.
It's also important to remember that, like, this is one piece of legislation among several that have, you know, added up to far more than we have ever invested in this, that has been passed just in the first 2 years of this administration. I, back in 2000, like in the mid 2000s, was very active in working on trying to get Waxman-Markey passed, which you remember, you're old enough for that. And
Yes.
that was a bill that would have had really big impacts, but was completely ignorant of the existence of environmental justice. Like, at that point in the climate movement, we just didn't talk about the fact that there is a disproportionate impact on people who have less. And the change in that time, which is not that long, you know, what, 10, 13 years, is really, like, very exciting and very inspiring. And I think that the other thing to remember is that all of this is directional. It's a trajectory towards something. And we aren't done here, but this is a huge step.
I like to say it's a huge shot in the arm. It's a big first step, but we have a lot more work to do. I think I'm just excited, as you've characterized, the momentum to pursue this upward trajectory to bring all people along so that we can make this country as great as she should be.
Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me talking about this. I know that you have a lot to do today and this week. I know that a lot of people have been working really hard to make this happen. And I hope it's feeling like a good day around where you're at.
Oh, it is. I appreciate this conversation, Hank. We should be very optimistic. And I'm not just saying that. I think, to your point, the level of action under President Biden's leadership over just the past 2 years, we're making up for lost time of the previous administration. We know what happened in those 4 years, but we should be optimistic. And this president is laser focused on keeping this country competitive.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Administrator Regan. This is an honor and a joy to talk to you.
Hey, man, I had a good time. Thank you.
Yeah. See ya.
All right, bye-bye.